I'm overjoyed to see this crowd. As I say, I think it probably really is a record. We may have come close a couple times, but I don't think we've ever surpassed this or quite equaled it. My name is Dick Calloway, and I'm the president of the Tryon History Museum. And we want to welcome you to our first official Tales of Tryon program for 2024. Tales of Tryon is made possible through the cooperation and support of the Polk County Community Foundation. We're grateful for that. I need to single out the bottle shop that provides our wine at wholesale prices. We're grateful for that. I would like to recognize each and every volunteer who's participated in this, but I'm afraid it's going to take too much of our valuable time if I do. So rest assured that each and every one of you is appreciated. There are 10, 12, 15 people at least in the room who have helped put this together and make it possible. Okay, the mission of the Tryon History Museum is to tell Tryon's story. Simple enough, but not always the easiest task. We try continually to be more imaginative, more innovative in the way we present things, and I think you'll agree when this is through that we've succeeded in that today. A big part of our vision is to let the world know that Tryon is a unique place. And I do mean unique. I don't mean different or unusual or even quirky or eccentric, though that to be sure figures into it at times. But unique, different, without compare. And what I would probably offer as Exhibit A is what we're talking about today, the Tryon Daily Bulletin, which was the world's smallest daily newspaper. Now, I'm not going to steal the thunder of our participants, but I do want to say a word about our moderator. Mike McHugh is no stranger to most of you, but he's a good friend, and I want to talk just a minute about him, not swell his head. He's been in Tryon about 40 years. He's a local businessman, but perhaps over that 40-year period has become better known as a historian. If it's history, Mike is passionate about it. Lore, legend, luminaries, anything local, he latches onto it. He's also quite an art historian. But it turns out that what he studied is, and Mike's a Westerner in the first place. Some of you may not know that. He was born and grew up in Colorado. Then he came east to school at Harvard, where he earned an undergraduate degree in economics and a master's degree in business administration. Now, during his 40-odd years here as a local businessman, he's become more keen all the time on the subject of entrepreneurship, which is something that's always interested him. And he was telling me earlier today that one reason he's so fascinated by artists is they're self-employed people generally, and he feels they're the ultimate entrepreneurs. And entrepreneurship and a devotion to it's been reflected in his own career, but also in those of the people he studied. Now, we're going to be talking today about two entrepreneurs, Seth Vining Sr. and Gladys Vining. They were both artistic people in their own way, and they certainly went into the business venture here in Tryon with entrepreneurial verve. They were barely out of their 20s. It was the eve of the Great Depression. They didn't know it at the moment, but they knew it soon enough, I'm sure. And they plowed ahead, and both were involved. Their grandsons can correct me if I have this wrong, but I think it's probably safe to say that they were both involved in this newspaper to some extent for the next 60 years. And made a mark on Tryon. It's still here and made Tryon part of the truly unique place that it is. So I'm going to turn it over to Mike McHugh and his panel of distinguished experts, all of whom had a direct connection to this newspaper. Enjoy.
Okay, our microphone is on, and we have an experiment today. Those of you who are standing, come on into the room. We promise you that this event lasts 1 hour, and that at 1 hour we will break the formal meeting to have informal mingling, and you'll be able to ask questions of any panelist. Tryon is a wonderful community, it is unique, Dick. I think you expressed that well. History is a team sport. And so what we have today is not somebody's speech, but a panel of people who know different things about this fascinating story of two remarkable people. Let me start by introducing the context of the founding of the Tryon Daily Bulletin. It was not the first newspaper in Polk County. There were two newspapers founded in the 1890s. One was called the Tryon Bee, and it was started by George and Winifred Morton, who lived in Packlet Valley at Valhalla. About that same time in the 1890s, the Polk County News was founded. It was in Columbus. It later moved to Saluda and eventually ended up in Tryon. And so those two newspapers were community newspapers here, but we don't have all their issues. Only a few random issues of the Tryon Bee are extant. The run that has been digitized of the Polk County News starts in 1902. And so there were some years there where we have no digitized newspapers. What's really great for all of you interested in Polk County history is how all the issues of the Polk County News from 1902 until the Tryon Daily Bulletin were founded exist online, and you can use them for research, but 2 years are missing. Completely missing. 1916 and 1917. Now in 1928, the Tryon Daily Bulletin was founded. All of its issues have been digitized from Volume 1, Number 1 in January of 1928 through 1952, is that right? About the early 50s. And how fun it is just to read these Tryon Daily Bulletins and these early newspapers, because they're a window to what this community was about. Who was here? Who was visiting? Who was advertising? It's really fun stuff. So you, after this meeting, can go to our taxpayer-funded site from state archives and find these issues that I've talked about. Now today we have 4 people helping out who are a lot more knowledgeable than I am about the history of the Tryon Daily Bulletin, and I'd like to tell you who those 4 people are. John Vining is the only Vining descendant still living here. He's a grandson of Gladys and Seth Vining. For 33 years, John was our county extension agent, our agriculture guru, and today he still edits the Polk Soil and Water Conservation Quarterly. So he's still in the journalism business. He has a son, Sam, who is a college history major. He's involved in a broad range of community projects. And he and his wife, Pam, have 2 other children, Kate and Rachel. Next on our panel, visiting with us, is Jim Vining, who lives in Rock Hill, South Carolina. He was the second of 7 grandchildren. He lived his first 21 years in Tryon, and he did work for the Tryon Daily Bulletin in the summer of 1969. Now their brother Seth is in attendance today. And we'd love for Seth to raise his hand so that we can see you on this historic occasion. Seth Vining. Thank you for coming, Seth. Many of you know, because he has appeared before on a panel for us, is Hub Arledge. His father was Elbert Arledge, Elbert Hubbard Arledge, and he's Elbert Hubbard Jr., aren't you? Now this is important in the history of the Tryon Daily Bulletin because Hub's dad, when he was 17 years old, went to work for Mr. Vining in 1930. Just 2 years after the Bulletin was founded. Seth Vining Sr. was not only his employer, but also a life counselor. And Albert Arledge bought the print shop from Sam Wood and his widow in 1940. So their family were in the printing business a very, very long time. He's going to be telling us more about that. Hub is a native of Polk County. Garland Goodwin, our next panelist, is a native of Polk County. He went to work for Mr. Vining when he was 10 years old in 1940. He became a journeyman letterpress printer by working in Elbert Arledge's shop. Get that connection? Until he got out of the Army. Then Garland went into the Air Force. He was in the Korean conflict. He became an aeronautical engineer, designed some notable airplanes, took early retirement in 1988. He still writes 2 columns for the Tryon Daily Bulletin every month and does 2 newsletters in his computer. Will soon be 94 years old. All right. We know that we want to know more about this remarkable couple who started the Tryon Daily Bulletin in 1928. And so I'm going to call on the grandsons to recall what they can about who was Gladys Vining, who was Gladys Gibbs, who was born here in Polk County.
Pardon me if I'm not very polished, but I'll give it my best shot. Oh gosh, I wouldn't make it in American Idol. My grandmother grew up in Mill Spring, and if y'all know where the Stonecutter Mill is, there's a little structure on the other side. It's like a little garden shed and a little rubble pile of stones. That's where the house sat at that location.
Speak up a little more if you can.
Yes, okay, sorry. In school, I was never accused of being quiet. So her dad was operating a mill. I thought it was a grist mill, but I read something recently where it said it was a sawmill. And unfortunately, he got pulled with the gears into the mill itself, and then within a few days, he passed. And shortly after that, my understanding is she had an uncle that sent her to Georgia to a school, some of y'all might know it, Nacoochee. It's not terribly far from where Helen, Georgia is today. And it's kind of strange now because the Nacoochee on line now has been moved to the North Carolina, Georgia line. The actual location of the school's there. And she, and I believe her younger sister, Ann, we always call her Ann, they both went there to get their schooling. And so I think that was part of the reason she had sort of a broad vision of what could be done and how to reach out and improve her education.
I won't stand up so people in the back can see. I know you're struggling to hear. A little bit about her background. Her grandfather was from Cooper's Gap. He fought for the Union in the Civil War. And the story that I heard was, and he was a member of Cooper's Gap Baptist Church, and they didn't want to fight in the war at all. And the South came and was scripting people out to fight, and they said, if we got to fight, we're going to fight for the Union. So a lot of the Cooper's Gap Baptist Church went to Knoxville, which was in Union control at that time, is 1863, and enlisted in the Union Army. And so that little bit. In addition to that, about her dad dying when she was 14. He was a woodman of the world, and when they dedicated the monument at his gravesite, there were over 2,000 people came for the dedication. So to me, that was pretty impressive. I'm not sure how my grandmother and my great aunt made it to Nutusi, because that was a Presbyterian school, boarding school. They were Baptist. My aunt seems to think that there was an uncle that was in the road construction. They kind of helped with the finances on that. But she went there. What's unusual about my grandmother was she was educated and she was athletic, something that women have been fighting to get. Even today, they do that. But she was a golfer. She played tennis. Jim Jackson said that she played basketball for the Piedmont College. When I interviewed her in the mid-'80s, I didn't ask the right questions. How did you get there? But after she finished the Cootsie, she went to Meredith College. And after a year at Meredith College, Piedmont, according to her, offered her a job to teach social studies 4 days a week. So the family lore was that they met at Piedmont College, and we just assumed they were both students. I've got an annual from the 21, 22 year. My granddad's in there, but my grandmother is not. And so, according to Jim Jackson, she played basketball there, so she must have been a student there at some time. My grandfather would have been behind her because of his history. So it could have been she had finished, but she didn't talk about going to school there. She said she was teaching. So we met there, but I think, it was remarkable that she, when they moved up here, she was in business, with my granddad. She taught school, and she could play golf until she was in her 90s. And so one of the things that Jim Jackson had commented is that she was really competitive. And if you've read any of his books, his mother wouldn't let him play cards on Sunday when he was growing up. So he'd go over to my grandparents' house and play bridge. And so he's usually with Jim Jackson, my dad, and my grandparents. And my aunt said that if one of them was gone, she'd have to fill in, and she hated that because it was so competitive. And she didn't like to be that competitive. So. But I think for a woman in that time to be educated, to be athletic, and to be outward, and also be in business is quite remarkable.
Very well said. Isn't that extremely interesting? Because it was always on the masthead that Seth M. Vining was editor, and Gladys's name was never up there. But now you have a little bit of background on the ladies' side of that team. Now we'll turn to Seth Macon Vining from Eufaula, Alabama. Let's have you guys share with us who your grandfather was.
I just look old. I'm not that much older, but I want to add that it's remarkable that both of them made it, because both their dads died when they were 14. And my grandfather's from Eufaula, Alabama, and he went to work when he was 12 as a printer's devil. And if you want to know what he looked like, he kind of looked like John. John looks like him. John's got the same kind of walk and stoop, and he laughs the same way. So if you really want to know what he was like, just follow John around and you'll see. But he could bend his fingers at this joint. I can't. But he could just do that. And he said the reason he could do that is because when he was growing up and learning to be a printer's devil, that they set tight and he had to hold the device. And so he did that so much that he was able to move his fingers like that. As long as I knew him, he would study the dictionary and learn new words and things. The other thing he did, and there's a rote memory system, and he prided himself in memorizing things. And one of his assets when he was in Tryon was he knew that all the people that lived in certain houses and when the houses built, because he knew, this stuff was just important to him, and he'd do that. But he left when he was a teenager, and he ran a print shop in Quincy, Florida. And that's where he was when he registered for the draft, World War I. And then he heard about a paper in Alabama that had closed, and they needed somebody to start it back up. So he went up there, a small town outside of Phoenix, Alabama, and didn't have a place to stay. So when he was there, he'd sleep on the table in the print shop. And he'd take newsprint to cover up to stay warm at night. But he eventually worked up to, it said to call it a hotel, but it's really a boarding house. And he did his memory tricks there and impressed people with that. But while he was there, he always wanted to continue his education. He saw an ad for Piedmont College. They needed somebody in the print shop. He wrote him a letter and said, well, what he really want to do was get a job that would pay for tuition. And they said, we'll give you enough work where you can pay for tuition. So this he was like 21, thereabouts. And he said he didn't fill out a place because there were a lot of World War I veterans in college at that time. So he went to Piedmont, worked in the print shop, and he could split his courses. Piedmont had a prep school for college, and then so he took some college classes and he took some prep classes. But he'd only been there a couple of years, and he became head of the print shop. And he started a newspaper, and from there he sold that paper and came to Polk County eventually. So I know you can ask questions if we're wrong, but he's worked his whole life basically, and I just. When my kids were 11 or 12, I just couldn't imagine them going out and working. I can't imagine me working at 12.
Isn't this fascinating? Getting the picture of who these entrepreneurs were who came here. Now we'd like to talk about Gladys Gibbs and her role in the newspaper, and I think we can call on our two other panelists to share with us what they remember about Gladys when your dad was working with them and when Garland was actually working there.
Well, Gladys worked in the Bulletin office, of course, but I didn't really spend much time as a child in the Bulletin office because it was a busy place. It wasn't a place to hang out and loaf. They were busy. If you've ever had to be on a deadline, think about getting a newspaper out daily and setting the type by hand. I'm going to show you, since Jim mentioned that device that Mr. Vining, because of his hands, this is that device. And you held it in your hand like this. Every piece of type, this is a copy of the first day Tryon Daily Bulletin. This is about 7-point type. Every piece of, every character has to be set by hand and a line, whatever length it is, and you pick it up and put it in this device. So there you go. So that's why his hand was like that. So, Mr. Vining was, I think, the most important person ever lived in our town, in my opinion. He put Tryon on the map with the Tryon Daily Bulletin, with the smallest newspaper in the world. And then, he's just a wonderful person. He was a mentor to my dad and, as I say, a life counselor, and they were friends for life.
Well said. What do you remember about Gladys, Garland?
She was Mrs. Vining to me. I never called either one of them by their first name because I was a little boy. And she was the secretary. She took in all the subscriptions, she kept all the records, everything, leave Mr. Vining free to edit the Bulletin. And she was a remarkable woman in many ways, and we all loved her, or at least I did.
Something really great is that in 1946, the national newspaper Grit published an article on the Tryon Daily Bulletin. And it has a very rare picture in their feature. It shows Seth Vining with his wife, a photograph of them. And the first time I've ever seen them working together, they are credited with her being co-editor, and Seth Vining is taking news notes from his wife. So, the Curb Reporter still happens, doesn't it? The Curb Reporter was the couple, not just Seth. We agree, panel? They worked very closely together. The 1946 article is kind of out there, but it really was an important newspaper because it was different from most community newspapers. And I'd like to give everybody on the panel a little chance here to share with you their perspectives about what was different about the Tryon Daily Bulletin from other community newspapers. Who would like to take that first?
Well, it was unique in the size, for one thing. This is a copy of the first day I've got over here. I've got an actual first day edition over here, and this is, I'll tell you, we sent this with the 70th anniversary issue over here. All of these I've saved. I'm a pack rat, my wife will tell you. All of these pictures, I have a picture of the linotype operator, Doc Dedman, and Mr. Vining, and my dad, several pictures there. But this says, this souvenir edition of the first Tryon Daily Bulletin, printed on Tuesday, January 31, 1928, is reprinted on the occasion of the 70th anniversary of the Tryon Daily Bulletin. Compliments of Arledge Printers Incorporated. So this went out with every bulletin in that 70th anniversary issue. I have the 10th anniversary issue over there, which you're welcome to come and look at all these afterwards. And if you'd like to look at what's on the table over there.
Garland, what do you think was different about the Bulletin from other newspapers you knew about?
Well, it was not only small, but it had only local news in it. Mr. Vining never, as far as I know, he never published any world news unless it was a really important something and he would mention it. It got a mention. But otherwise, it was local news about local people. And I think that was a large reason for its success.
I agree with that completely. Studying the Tryon Daily Bulletin compared to other community newspapers, they tried to be the source of all the news. Here in Tryon, just like Garland's telling us, the focus was on the community. It was assumed that the readers read other media. They read magazines. They read big city newspapers. Sometimes, you might remember, he would reprint an article from another newspaper, isn't that right? But it was always about how that connected to Tryon. He would report an article from a big city paper talking about somebody who was from Tryon. Let's build on that idea.
I would say that when I worked here during the summer, one of my jobs, and they subscribed to every local paper, and it's kind of reciprocal. They sent them the Bulletin, and the other papers came in. But one of my jobs was to go through every one of those papers and look for any connection to Tryon or Polk County. And so And then I would clip it out, back it up with the paper. When they decide what need to go in, they go in the paper. They'd always credit the other newspaper. You know, it would say, you know, whatever the information was, it would say from the Spartanburg Herald, from the, you know, the different papers. And so I like to think of it as kind of like, it was Facebook before Facebook. Because they depended on, instead of having reporters, they depended on citizen reporters. Now, I thought it was kind of unique, but a friend of mine is a retired editor from what then was a small town, Hillhead. And he said they didn't have the staff to go out and get the news. Now, they paid people $25 to bring in news articles, the average citizens to come in. To my knowledge, the Bulletin did not do that. What they could have done, well, if you give us information from Sunny View, we'll send you a subscription. Because a famous local artist drew a picture of my granddad in, I don't know, it's charcoal or pencil. And in exchange, he gave the artist a lifetime subscription to the Bulletin. And so they were always doing that. But I'm going to say something, because hubby's here. I appreciate finding some of the history, because Arledge Printers, it was big on the list. If they got any office supplies or pencils, whatever, they always went to Arledge Printers to get all their needs for the office. And I knew that hubby's dad worked there, but I didn't know all the relationships. But it was, you could not buy something somewhere else. If it had to do with the office, it had to go from Arledge Printers. And whether that's loyalty or business arrangement, I don't know what it was. But, and same token, when people advertise with the Bulletin, you shop there. And this day of Amazon, it'd make it tough. But you know, and plus when you don't have a lot of businesses, but whoever advertised with the Bulletin, that's where you shop.
John, you want to add?
Yeah. I just want to mention sort of a brief story. When I was little, I'd come into the Bulletin office, and my grandfather would say, "John Hamilton," which is my middle name for him. He'd say, "Any news?" And thank you. And I said, "Well, did you hear about the wreck out there on Harmon Field?" And he'd go, "No, I didn't hear about that." So I'd be in the office doing something, piddling around, and I'd hear him calling Tryon police and going, "Hey, I need a report on that wreck that was at Harmon Field last week." And he continually was interested in what was going on. And like Jim said, he really was wanting the community to thrive, and he wanted the Bulletin to be part of it.
Well said. Okay, panel. Was the Tryon Daily Bulletin a partisan newspaper? A partisan newspaper? Was it associated with a political party in the public's mind? Not at all. Not at all. In the history of community journalism, most newspapers have a political purpose, angle, and reputation. The Tryon Daily Bulletin did not. This implicitly was one of the philosophies that distinguished the Tryon Daily Bulletin from other community newspapers of its time. It did report some political news, but there were not editorials in favor of political candidates. Is that correct? Something to observe. Something to observe, and something that everybody thought was very important about the character of the newspaper. Did the newspaper do investigative journalism that attacked people? No. All the panelists are shaking their head. What are you talking about? Not the Tryon Daily Bulletin. Not to say that that cannot be a premise of a community newspaper, but in this case it was not. Is that correct? And so what was happening with the Curb Reporter? What was it talking about? I think each of our panelists can share that.
I think I was telling Dick Calloway not long ago that the Curb Reporter was our most favorite thing to read, because if you want to know what was going on, and Pat McCool, the mayor in Columbus, we were talking one day, and Pat said when he was in college, the first thing he did when he got the paper was go to the Curb Reporter and see what was going on. And we're not talking about meetings or anything like that. If there's something noteworthy about a local individual, lots of times he would highlight that individual in the Curb Reporter, and it wouldn't be just one. It'd be maybe, sometimes it'd be as many as 5 or 6 in there, local folks that had done something good that he could share with the community.
Yeah, I would say they didn't have editorials, but that doesn't mean that they weren't active. And Mike sent us an article about they were petitioning to get an ABC store. And my granddad was one of the people that was on the group that was trying to get an ABC store. And probably, Tryon was probably the only place you could legally get alcohol west of Charlotte and north of Columbia for a long time. And I've got some ABC stories. Don't call me grandfather, so I won't go into that. But I remember him saying when he was starting the paper in North Georgia, he worked with the paper there to get the apple. There's a big old concrete apple was put at the train depot in Cornelia, and the main line from Charlotte to Atlanta went through there, and he was working with what he called the Board of Trade to try to get people interested in stopping and getting off and to see. And he told me that experience showed to him the power of a community newspaper, what you could do to better the community. And I think he always felt like the Bulletin was an extension of the Chamber of Commerce. That it was important for the Bulletin to put a favorable light to encourage, for the good of the community. And, being in that business, that's like running a dairy farm. And because the Bulletin came out 6 days a week. And, when you didn't have a big crew, it was tough. And I don't know how he had time to do all the things he did, but money wasn't his driver. His driver was being the Chamber of Commerce for this community. And so anyway, that's my thing.
Don't know what I can add here, but I remember Mr. Vining, we would get the Curb Reporter was the last thing, and we'd get that on the press, and he would go out on Main Street, Trade Street, Tryon, picking up news and ads. And it was a hands-on business with him. He didn't wait for it to come to him. He went out and got it.
Yeah, Mr. Vining literally went on the street with a pen and paper and got news. It was a Curb Reporter, for sure. And nobody's mentioned his typewriter. I don't know if you're going to mention his typewriter and what his desk looked like, but he would come in with his notes and type the story that he wrote and then send it back to Dr. Dedman to set on the linotype machine.
Let me just add something to that. John has the same filing system. If you go into his desk in the Bulletin office, it'd be pile high with papers. Now, he knew where everything was. If you went into John's office, and his with the Extension Service, it'd be piled full of papers, and he knew where everything was, or at least he thought he knew where everything was.
There's another side to this gathering news I'd love to share. And that was what I've observed about Seth's sense of personal privacy. And sometimes he would write about the need for personal privacy. If somebody said, I really don't want you to talk about me, he respected that wish. And he provided an example of that when Harry Emerson Fosdick came from New York City to recover at Thousand Pines. Has anybody heard of the famous preacher Harry Emerson Fosdick? He came here to get away from publicity. And he told Mr. Vining, I don't want anything about me in the newspaper. Mr. Vining respected that wish. And when Grace Coolidge, the widow of Calvin Coolidge, our U.S. president, came here, she was interested in the same thing. And he told his readers, newspapermen were calling me to find out what she was up to, and what about this rumor that she was going to get married again? And he says, I don't know anything. You're not going to get it out of me, and you're not going to get it out of her, because I don't even know how to reach her. And so the sense of personal privacy was part of that philosophy. Another thing that was going on in community newspapers, and it still goes on today, is who went to whose party. Have you seen that? Who got invited to go to the swank party? And there would be a society column. Have we all seen that? Yes. There was never a society column in the Tryon Daily Bulletin. Nor was it ever reported who attended whose function. And I love observing how the Vinings mixed up in issues, on pages, the high and the low and the privileged and the not so privileged who lived around here. A great example of that was provided by John Vining when he selected a February 12, 1940 edition that shows Senator Bacon from Tryon, chairman of Governor Huey's Polk County Hospitality Committee, and he's going to Florida. So the senator, the mayor, got his picture in the paper, and isn't that great? What is the next item following that? I'll read to you verbatim. The sewing committee of the Women's Society of the Erskine Memorial Church will sew for finish relief tomorrow at the Congregational Manse. All women of the community interested to help are cordially invited. Interesting juxtaposition there. The next item is Roy Mays of Columbus was taken to St. Luke's this morning for treatment. Following that, E.A. Emmerman is manager at Oak Hall now. He was formerly manager of the Hotel Manatee at Bradenton and Hotel Sarasota Terrace at Sarasota. And the next one you're going to love. It's a quotation. God gave us two ends, one to sit on and the other to think with. A man's success depends on which end he uses most. It is a case of heads you win and tails you lose. Isn't that great? So that gives you the character of what was scattered around in this great little newspaper.
Bob Arledge suggested that I mention Seth Sr.'s typewriter. He had an open frame typewriter, and he had one of these telephones that stands freestanding. So when the phone rang, you gotta have a pencil. Where's the pencil? Somewhere under that pile of newspapers. But there's a string on the left side, and he would pull the string, and here come the pen, pencil, Of course, today that would be a ballpoint pen, and so then he would write. All right, then he's always got all these newspapers piled around the typewriter, and he'd read these, and he always wanted to clip something out to put in the bulletin. Where are the scissors? Ah, there's a string on the other side. Pull that string, and here come the scissors. Right in his hand.
Great memory, Garland. Hub, I'd love you to share one or two of your favorite memories of the Bulletin.
Well, just going in and watching them. I mean, as I say, as a child, I didn't go in there a lot because it was a busy place. You didn't loaf in there. But I'd love to watch Doc Deadman on that line. If anybody's ever watched a guy on a line machine, it's a feather touch. Doc would just, I mean, he'd tickle those keys and throw that thing, and that slug would come through. And then if the slug had a burr or a misspelled word or something, he'd kick it out and throw it back in the hell box, which was where the lead melted, where the slug came from. So it was interesting being in there and watching them feed the press. You know, it's a busy place. It wasn't a place to play, I can tell you that.
Jim Vining, you worked one summer at the Bulletin. What do you remember about that?
Well, I was on the go most of the time. Back then, the mail came by train. And I'm not sure how they transferred it, but they put it on the hook for freight trains come by that didn't stop. And so about an hour after the train go through, I'd have to go up to the post office because there wasn't internet or anything, so you depended on mail coming in. So I was always making trips to the post office to get the mail when I wasn't proofreading or looking through other communities' newspapers. And mostly what I did was I helped my grandmother out so she could go play bridge or golf. So I gave her an opportunity to slip out a little more than the times that she did. It was always a deadline. I mean, many nights they would be working late, working on the what they had to do to get the bulletins mailed, because it was dependent on mail for the bulletins to go out. And if it was too late, they would have to take the papers to area newspapers so it would be delivered the next day. And so it was many a late night because, for whatever reason, a press problem, but they had to, you know, it was worse than the dairy business at times. And I'll say this, the Landrum leader bailed them out. Whenever the press would break, they'd go down to Landrum and they'd print the paper down there, and that was important that the community pulled together. I know we're running out of time, but Margaret Culkin Banning somehow just loved my granddad. And she wrote a lot of books. And if you haven't read her 2 books about Tryon, although it's called DeSoto, it's not called Tryon. But it's such interesting people, and I took my love to the country. She writes about the Bulletin, it's called the Crier, the town crier. But she does a pretty good description of what it was like to walk into the Bulletin office and with the interaction with the editor. But they're not called Seth, but so if you haven't, and being from here, it would be a good information. You can recognize some people, but also she talks about the social scene in Tryon. And I can't verify that that's correct, but I believe a lot of it is.
Jim, I'm so glad you brought up Margaret Culkin Banning. For those who are new to this community, she was the grande dame of the literary community here. And she came during the 30s from Minnesota to spend her winters here and remained here for the rest of her life. The 2 titles that Jim Vining mentions are at Lanier Library, and they are great reading. Knowing that tip that she's writing about how it was at the Tryon Daily Bulletin, that's a great contribution here. She was a great supporter of Mr. Vining, and she knew the publishing world. She was highly successful in the publishing world, made a great deal of money writing magazine articles and opinion pieces for nationally known publications. She knew that this was an extraordinary and very different kind of newspaper that earned everyone's support. Now, John Vining will share with us his memories of growing up in Tryon, and here were this remarkable couple. What can you share with us, John, about how they felt doing this job?
Well, I think my brother Jim alluded to it, that my grandfather worked a lot. I mean, he started at such a young age, but he worked almost his entire adult life. And my grandmother, I know my dad used to always say, and he always said, he thought that's where I got this trait. Grandmother was a terrific gardener. And my dad would always say, she was the best gardener he'd ever seen that had no formal training. It just came natural to her. And those are two memories I have. I just want to talk about two things I remember as a little kid. My grandfather, during World War II, had a hard time getting materials. And so a couple of episodes of the paper were in brown ink, some in green ink, some in red ink, some in sort of a goldish color. And Jim mentioned the paper was printed 6 days a week, but after World War II, it went to 5. And my favorite memory of the building itself was downstairs used to be a barber shop. And they had huge pictures of actors glued to the wall. Bing Crosby, Henry Fonda, Bob Hope. And I remember going down there as a kid, I was just enamored with it. And there were actually 2 barber chairs still down there. They weren't in very particularly good condition. But I guess Mike has told me, and I didn't realize that one time I think Tryon had 7 boarding houses. And I guess a lot of them didn't have bathrooms or limited bathrooms. And down in there also was an area for men to go in there and shower. And I guess that's one way they were able over time. I think Mike had asked in one of the emails correspondence about how did they make it through the Depression? Because think about it, the newspaper was started at a really tough time. And I think a lot of it was they were creative. They had the barbershop downstairs. Lots of times I can remember being at home and there'd be a pan of brownies at the house, and I go, wow, these are really good. Where did these come from? And somebody traded a half-a-year subscription for a pound of brownies. So there would be some bartering going on, and I think that's one of the ways they made it. They were very creative.
Well, this has been a lot of fun, and we're going to give audience an opportunity to ask questions for the next 10 minutes, and then we will break up our formal meeting where you can come and you can talk with any of these panelists, anything you want to talk about. Yes, question.
What was the biggest circulation of the paper?
What was the peak of circulation for the Tryon Daily Bulletin during the period we're talking about, which is Gladys and Seth Vining's regime into what, the 50s? Is that when they kind of gave up their management of it? Do we know? About 70 or so. Okay, your guy's father took over management in around 70 or so. Now, you helped print the newspaper, so I think Garland gets a shot. How many copies were printed when you were there?
About 1,800, as I remember.
Monday's paper went out on Friday afternoon. They took Monday's paper to the post office on Friday afternoon. And I didn't realize that till just now. I didn't know when they stopped 6 days. But I have one of my copies over here. My grandfather died, my mother and daddy died early on a Saturday morning, and his obit is in the Saturday paper that day, on the front page of the paper over there, on the Saturday day. So that's how they worked up there.
Extraordinary commitment. Yes, sir.
What are some of the funniest memories that they have of the paper and some of the articles?
Okay, Tim Brennan wants to know the funny stuff. Anybody have any funny stuff? John, I see you've got something funny to say.
He would frequently talk about things that were maybe not written in the best way, like someone put an ad in, free dog, eats everything, loves children. I think those are some of the best. I mean, he would, because remember, the newspaper, the people would bring the ads in and they essentially run it the way they brought it in. And then I think the one he always liked, I didn't like it as funny as that one, but they always had an ad for small ladies wristwatch. And he always thought that was kind of odd, that it would only be for small ladies. But he enjoyed the ads that came in and they were printed as the owner of the ad had written it.
Great. Jerry Soderquist.
Mike, where was the pool hall?
Where was the pool hall?
It was under Owens Pharmacy, about where Brady Insurance is now, or Main Street Financial. You went down some stairs right down there, and it was under the what that building is where Brady's is now, under the 5 and 10 in Brady's.
Okay, one more question before we. Huh?
Tell about how the Curb Reporter logo came about. Do you know, John?
Yes. That's a good story. You want me to do it? Okay. The Service Club, Rotary or Kiwanis? Mr. Knight? Huh? Kiwanis? This famous cartoonist, Clifford Berryman, came as a guest to the meeting. And he saw the Curb Reporter logo that they'd been using. Yeah. And he developed a new Curb Reporter logo. This was the guy who invented the teddy bear cartoon. Just one of many famous creative people who came to Tryon over the years. He developed the cartoon that is still used today.
Now, when I got to Newport News, I found Berryman's brother in the nursery business. So we exchanged information there. But I bought most of my trees and shrubs from Mr. Berryman.
Thank you. One more. Yes, yes, the syndicated North Carolina history. Yes, yes.
I'd like to know more about that. Please try to share it.
That is produced by our state archives, and it's syndicated. Any newspaper in the state can pick that up. And so Tryon Daily Bulletin today chooses to print those to learn more about North Carolina history. All right, I think, Wanda.
To add to your answer, those columns are all collected in a book that's for sale at the museum.
Plug for Tryon History. Let's have a round of applause for Tryon History Museum and our panelists today. Now, Dick Calloway, who is president, is going to conclude this historic event with brief remarks.
I'm going to conclude it very quickly. Thank you, Mike, Garland, Hub, John, Jim. Really enjoyed this. I want to make mention of our next definitely scheduled Tales of Tryon production is going to be Lily Corbus. I think Lily's correct title is Professor of Art History Emerita at the University of North Carolina at Charlotte, and she is going to talk about Tryon photographers, 1900 to 1950. So I know this probably should generate almost as much interest as the Daily Bulletin. This really, Tryon has a remarkable photographic history based on what little I know, and I'm looking forward to learning a lot more about it. So right here, same time, same place, May 9th. We'll keep you informed on any other developments. Thank you all for being here.